agenda?
So moved.
Yes?
Yes. And
And I'm fine with the
requisitions?
acquisition.
Me too. Yes.
Yes.
Have no add-ons today.
Very good. We'll dive right in. Trevor, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for having me today.
Judges are probably gonna.
I met with
Oh,
you.
we probably should wait a couple minutes if the judges are coming.
I heard from Melissa this morning, and she said both judges were planning to come over this morning.
We're 3 minutes ahead of schedule, so.
They're like, okay. I do have a couple questions that I can kind of get out of the way. The airport master plan is currently ongoing. The board chair of the airport board wanted to know if the Board of Commissioners would like to engage in their vision for that plan prior to hearing some of the other stakeholders, such as the trustees, business community. You know, that's one of those things, I can see it both ways. You know, that you may want to see what the input is from some of those stakeholders and then provide your vision around it, and or you might want to provide what your vision is first. So they just wondered if you wanted, which way you would prefer to engage that process.
I'd like to hear from the stakeholders who utilize the airport. I don't have a particular vision for the airport in the absence of their comment and input personally, but I could go either way.
Give me the two options one more time.
Input into the master plan prior to the other stakeholders' input, such as the business community, township trustees.
So the question is, do we want to lay out our vision first?
Correct.
And then let people try to get on board with that? Or we're just kind of listening and then we adjust and come up with the plan afterwards?
Correct.
Yeah, but I don't understand. How would our vision be different from the people who run the airport?
Not particularly the people that run the airport, but the township trustees have input into the master plan. The business community has input in, or, you know, they're
Sure,
seeking
I
input
get
into
that,
the master plan.
But I didn't understand I'm happy to have them give their input and things like that, so I don't understand. Are you suggesting that we will give input as to our vision?
Yes.
First?
No, I'm asking you, do you want to have it first, or do you want to have it after they've
You see, I
gotten the
don't have-
trustees?
I don't have a vision outside of the people who run
Okay.
it.
So I'm hearing you and Shannon say you'd like the input of the other stakeholders first and then provide,
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm reactive to this, and I'm not leading it.
okay?
That's my,
Which is fine.
Okay, all right, and the judges are here, so I don't want to make them wait.
Very good. 9:05. We don't have to fine anyone that just walked in the room or anything for being tardy. Everybody's on time.
We like to be on time. The C word is contempt. We don't.
Very good. Trevor, good morning. Let's, your show. What's going on here?
Good morning. I met with you back in March. We talked about the future of County Core, whether we were going to remodel the space or possibly add on to Common Pleas or build a new building. And since then, we hired a criteria architect firm, VSWC Architects out of Mason. They've helped us explore the different options since then. They've narrowed it down to 5 viable options for the project, which they're going to present to you here shortly. The main reason we're here today is to ask the board for direction on which option we're going to choose moving forward. Once we have an option picked out, then we can advertise for a design build firm.
And again, if we start at the beginning, the 30,000-foot flyover view is county court and the jail operations, the sheriff's office were all combined, essentially.
Correct.
Now that we just built a new jail, now that the sheriff's office is actually moving out, now we're gonna have more open space in that existing facility. And now the question is, what do we do with it? Do we rehab it? Do we tear it down? Do we build a new? And so I assume those are the things we're gonna talk about.
Correct, yeah, and the criteria architect team is gonna come up and walk you through the 5 different options here. So I'll introduce them now from VSWC Architects in Mason. Mr. Jim Boris, Mr. Brad Adams.
Very good. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
All right, I'm going to take the microphone here. First of all, thanks a lot for having us today. We appreciate the
Hold it
opportunity.
closer to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We appreciate the opportunity to come up and present to you. We've had a really good time working with Trevor, looking at the different options. And I think we've got some really good options to show. As Trevor said, we're going to present 5 options. We went through probably 12 different options or maybe more different variations, kind of narrowed it down to the options that seem to really work and be the best options to show. So I'll just jump right in. Brad's handing out a handout for you. This is kind of your overall site plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these 5 different options that are shown here in the yellow blocks. So there again, just to orient everybody, this is your main drive. This is your main drive in here. We're, of course, in the administration building that's located right here. And then we're going to talk about each one of these individual options and some of just the major pluses and minuses of each one of those options. So we can either wait till the very end to ask questions as we go through, or we can ask questions as we go, however you'd like to do it. So let's just jump right into the first option. Okay, this is in the blue outline right here, this is the existing county court building as it stands right now. This option would be to basically keep that building, do a total renovation of that space into the county court building. There is no new construction slated with this particular option. And then probably after this was renovated, maybe the jail and that gets demolished out, so that basically you would have the renovated building here and the parking that's there currently. Some of the disadvantages of this project are that this is going to be a tough renovation, to be honest with you. And our understanding is that this building would need to stay active during this renovation. So this would have to be done in segments. You'd probably have to do wings at a time. There would be a lot of moving around, shuffling around. This would be a difficult project just because of the logistics of it and trying to keep operations intact as we go through. The other thing I would say is probably this would be a total renovation. Okay, so this would be major construction. This is fairly, would be almost a gut and redo. Some of that work new HVAC systems, new electrical systems, all new finishes. There'd be a lot of walls that would be torn out and redone to make this building function. We'll go to the next slide. This is just a quick diagram of what that interior remodeling could look like. And this does address a lot of the issues of the building that it currently has. One of the biggest issues is the lobby space in this building is just very, very, very small for the number of people that are coming in and out. So this addresses opening up this main lobby. And then also you're going to see on all of our plans, we're identifying the different functions within the building with colors. Orange is the court, green is the probation, blue is a clerk of courts. And you're going to see that on all of our plans as you go through. Again, this does some nice things. Does open up the lobby, separates public from the private areas in the back, moves the clerk of courts off this main lobby to give them a little more space. So it does address some things. I think the thing that we would point out is you could go through and do all this work, but the reality is if you were starting a new building, it would probably not be this shape and it would probably not function this direct way. So there again, just another way of looking at it.
So you're basically taking the existing sheriff's office and then just repurposing that to the right?
Correct. And there again, some of the walls would probably remain. Some of them would be torn out to create the spaces that would be needed for the court.
So how much total square footage?
That is 12,500 square
Would be
feet.
picked up by the court that is current existing sheriff's?
Well, it would be this entire wing, right, Trevor?
Yeah, you would be picking up about
6,000
Yeah.
or something, okay.
All right, so are options B, C, D, and E all the same, but not in the same location?
They're going to be similar.
Okay.
This is, moving on to option B, what this shows then is actually constructing a whole new county court building adjacent to the existing building. And to orient you somewhat, this is the SWAT garage or the gun range currently. So that would have to be torn down. You could construct a new courts building here, totally finish it off, and then functions can move from the existing building over to this building. And then this could even be repurposed or torn down, whatever you chose to do. One of the nice things about this plan is that it does move this new building kind of to the side of this big space. So what that would do then is allow you to reserve this big green area here for future functions that the county may have. And I think you can kind of see that on this plan. It would, if this was torn down, it would kind of preserve this entire green area right here for future. So we feel like that is a plus of that plan. The other thing I will point out is, and we just talked about, and you're going to see this on some of our other plans, when we went through the program of the spaces that were really required for the court, the reality is they really need about 17,000 square feet of space. So there again, the renovation of the existing building is confining those needs somewhat.
They need it today, or that's the future growth also accounted for?
This is today's space, the 17,000.
Why would, if we're gonna build new, why would we build only to accommodate today's? Do we think that the caseload or anything like that's going to go up substantially over time with the increase in population?
All of these buildings, I think we'd want to plan with future addition spaces on them. And you are going to see that on one of our plans that's coming up.
Well, generally, we like to build space that would accommodate, you know, it might not be finished off space, but it's at least under a roof, it's there, you know, there's a couple thousand extra square feet, we need to open up another courtroom or what have you. That's not accounted for?
That is not accounted for in these 17,000 square feet. Basically, that full 17,000 square feet is accounted for currently.
So
It
we're
is a current
saying
need.
that if they're currently at 6,000 or 7,000 square feet, that a doubling to 12,000 is still 50% off from what their current needs are? So they're basically in a third of the space?
That is correct. And a lot of it is just those big lobby areas and that kind of thing are right now grossly undersized for the functions that are in there.
All right, so what is the difference between that option and the other three options?
Okay, let's move on. Okay,
Well, but before we move on,
Yes.
Does the sheriff need to keep, are they planning on keeping that SWAT garage?
As of now, yeah.
As of now, that's correct.
Then-
There's no plans to replace the SWAT garage.
All right, so that's not an option then.
Well, then we'd have to build a new SWAT garage.
That's correct.
that is
But
correct.
why would we not move it basically, you know, upper right a little bit where the current jail facility is? Keep that, you know, basically moving it towards you a little bit on that diagram? That, yeah, you're taking, or, no, up, you know, towards.
this way?
Yeah, up in there.
Yeah,
And leave the SWAT garage as is, but yet you still get to utilize all the parking. You're still keeping it off to the side to try to keep the main area open eventually.
I think they have an option that's even better than this.
Okay.
That's a new building construction that I think you might like better.
yeah.
So,
We got lots of other place to go.
And
Yes.
you're
Yes.
absolutely right.
Yes.
I mean, there is flexibility with where this building, it could be pulled up, it could be pulled over. There is flexibility. I think there again, we're looking at the mile-high look of this thing, and I think the idea here is we could get a new courts building on this site if that was an option that everyone liked.
that's my favorite.
Okay, this is actually moving then over to the Common Pleas Court building. And as you can see, we're showing the new addition, basically sandwiched between the Board of Elections and the Common Pleas Court building, filling in this back corner. Some of the advantages to this plan that we talked about is that there would be one entry and one security check-in point for both courts. There is some synergies and disadvantages around having both courts in one building. Some people like that, some people do not like that. So that's kind of a plus and minus. The other thing that is nice about locating it here is it does leave future expansion room for the Common Pleas Court up in this area right here. And there again, I'll go ahead and point out, this building, when it was built back in the 70s, it was master planned to have a wing put on here and a wing put on here. You guys have already currently put this one on. This one is, there's still room out there to do that. So there again, this would kind of reserve this space for future use with the Common Pleas Court. Some of the disadvantages of this plan is there's some major utilities that are in this area. There's an emergency generator. There's the tower, radio tower in here. There's some parking in here. We would be covering up some windows in some of these offices that are currently here. So there are some pluses and minuses to that. This is just a real quick plan. There again, we laid out these plans just to test the square footage that we would need. This, there again, is the Common Pleas building up this way, the end of it. This is the Board of Elections building here. And you can see this kind of fills in this entire corner. And it is somewhat limited by the road that goes around. So this one would be kind of shoehorned into that space. Go on. Okay. This is probably, I'm on option D. This is probably the most apparent, and this is when we first started this project. This was kind of the apparent thing to look at. There again, because this building, the Common Pleas building, was master planned for a wing addition here, this is kind of set up to do that. So there is a possibility that you could build the new county court right onto the end of the Common Pleas. With this one, we've actually created a separate entry for this building. So this would remain the Common Pleas entry, new entry for the county court building here, and then there'd also be some additional parking that would be needed here. But most of this parking could be shared between the two courts buildings. Disadvantage is, of course, you're basically using up any of the future expansion area that was originally slotted for the Common Pleas Court.
And from an operational, because there's obviously the initial capital cost, but then there's ongoing operational cost. One of the things that I would be most interested in, if we're doing an addition to that facility, is the concept of one security. So what was the justification for having a separate entrance when you have an existing secure entrance 100 feet away?
And that is some of the options that we looked at. Is there is the possibility that you could come in here, come down this main corridor and enter through into this court area. It would cause a lot of disruption to the court activities that were happening here in this wing. So that's why the preference was to have a separate entry for those two courts.
Why would that cause disruption there?
Well, apparently, and you guys can help us out on there, apparently there's lots and lots of people that are coming here, right? 100 people roughly at a time.
Yeah, there's a large corridor there that on either side it's got some courtrooms for the domestic relations court currently, and it's got some magistrates' rooms, but it's a very large hallway. And if you had a open spot right after you entered from that area into the new court addition, why is that a disruption? So people walk back the corridor and they go into the waiting area.
Right, you're talking about people milling around outside of like a hearing room immediately. But you could fix that problem by basically putting in some false corridor, a new hallway to where those rooms still exist, but you're just narrowing the hallway a little bit to give some buffer between the actual, basically more of an area right there in front of those magistrates' offices.
So keep in mind, this is just the criteria architect. Once we actually hire a design builder, they will have their own architect that will actually take a look at kind of what we've scoped at you know, 100-foot or 1,000-foot level, and then they may say, look, you know, this is as the architect that's gonna construct this project, have you thought about that? We had that with, HGC. When we actually hired HGC, they came in with a totally different look to the addition of probate juvenile court that we honestly hadn't really thought of. So this is kind of this is considered at the 1,000-foot level. This isn't nitty-gritty. We'll get nitty-gritty, but
Okay.
it's where do you
But-
want it
but-
to go?
But where I want it to go is contingent upon
I
initial
understand.
capital cost and ongoing
I
operational
understand.
cost.
You and
So-
I are on the same page. I've had that conversation, and we'll continue to refine that conversation if you select an option where we already have court security.
Okay.
And one thing I want to point out is I've had discussions with the sheriff. There's very little cost savings in having one security entrance. If we have to build a separate entrance, we already own the security equipment because it's at the current county court building. And the sheriff plans on bringing that security staff to Common Pleas because the people load in the building is going to increase.
Right, what he's saying is that there's no additional cost, I'm saying there would be a cost savings. Because right now, we've got two separate securities.
Correct, but the sheriff plans on bringing the staff that mans the other security at county court.
Yeah, but David's
down
gonna,
to Common.
David's gonna X that staff out. He's not gonna use it. So, I get that.
But I
get
don't
big
think the
sites.
sheriff is planning to X that person out. I think the sheriff would be planning, if they are gonna be located in Common Police Court, it's my understanding, according to the conversations that Trevor has had, that person would then come to Common Police Court and be an additional staff person at Common Police Court.
Okay, I get
Because
it.
you're bringing several hundred more people a week through Common Pleas compared to what you're doing now.
All right, go ahead. What's your next?
Okay. There again, this is just a real quick diagram of how this could work. This is there again, this is the end of the Common Pleas Court building. Here's the main entry that we've just been talking about. Here's this main corridor that we're actually been discussing. There again, we're showing a new entry here that kind of parallels with this one. There again, just like you're saying though, if the decision was to access this through this way, that could be too. That's a detail, just as Tiffany's saying, that'll happen later on as things progress in the design. But anyway, you know, this is just a general layout, and it's just to show how things would fit in. I think it does work real well with the entry here, big lobby. The lobby serves both the probation, the clerk of courts, and the courtroom. We have back areas, private areas, employee entries, all those type things. So the plan does work well. The space is right. The amount of space seems to be right. So it's kind of a diagram to show how that could work. Okay. Our last option, option E, is actually a new building. And if you look at your site plan, it would actually be located between the current Common Pleas Court building and the juvenile court building. And if you're out on the site, there's a big mound that's kind of right here right now that you'll see. So basically where that big mound is where this proposed building could go. We think this location's kind of nice because it basically aligns all the judicial functions on this side of the road. You're gonna have your new jail here, Commons Pleas Building, county court here, and juvenile court here. They all kind of align together and can act as one. We talked about, Trevor talked about, you know, people going to the wrong courts building on a regular basis. We think that with some signage and these major entries to these, that we can help with some of that. This one has a major entry, of course, already. We would bring a new major entry off of the road here on axis with the new proposed county court. And then, of course, the juvenile court has its road and its turnaround here. So there again, we think that is kind of nice. Another advantage of this plan, of course, is there again, we're reserving space here for future addition onto the Common Pleas Court building. Some additional parking out front. This plan does actually show some future addition space that could be put onto this building. You want to flip to the plan, Brad? There again, this is just a quick diagrammatic plan of that. This is the main entry into that space, large lobby that serves all three functions. And then, as you can see, we have some future rooms slated over on this side of the building. Okay. All right, let's talk cost for a second. Okay, so just so everybody understands, there again, we're at the mile-high stage here. These are not line item takeoff costs that we're showing here. These are basically square footage cost compared with other similar type projects that are built. The other thing that everybody kind of knows is right now costs are absolutely on the rise, and estimating work right now is very tough because of material supplies, labor shortage, all those things that are happening that everybody kind of knows. So we actually even changed and bumped some of these estimates up on Trevor just a couple weeks ago, just because of the market is continued
But
to
all
rise.
that inflation's transitory, it's gonna come right back. Just kidding.
Well, we hope so, yes. Yes, we hope so.
That's what I keep hearing out of Washington, this is all just
Well,
fake.
we hope so.
Okay.
So anyway, these numbers that we have here, these are basically turnkey numbers that we're showing, okay? So these numbers include the cost of the construction of the building, any kind of site work, utilities that would happen. It has furnishings included in it. It has a 5% construction contingency fund in there. And then it also has non-construction costs, which would be the cost of the architect and engineer, the construction manager cost, surveys, soil
So
testing.
you're saying this is close to all in?
This is all in. This is as close as we can get to all in on these type projects. I think the thing to point out is, let's start with this one. The renovation of the existing building is the least expensive, as you can see, of the 5 options. The reason this is least expensive, of course, is number one, it's a renovation, it's not new construction. And number two, we're doing a lot less square footage. There again, this is based on 12,500 square feet. The rest of these are basically based on 16,500 to 17,000 square feet. So thus, a lot of the cost difference that has to go with that.
Is the cost per square foot the same between option A and option E, for example?
They're all similar.
They're all
If you
similar,
if you
okay.
do the math on these, we're right around $300 a square foot.
Okay, that's helpful.
You know, some of them, it's like I did the math, it's like $304 a square foot up to 311 or 17 or something. But roughly, they're all $300 a square foot.
Okay, that's
Is kind of
So the
going
higher
rate.
cost entails things like moving telecom towers and things like that, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely correct.
One thing you didn't do, and I'm gonna ask you why you didn't do this. Why can't you, if you're gonna do a complete gut in A, why can't you do a complete gut but first do an add-on to A, where the building actually attaches to A, create it first with a courtroom and some places that you can then move into, but you're connecting it. And then you have them start operating in that space temporarily while you then gut A entirely and finish it. Did you consider doing something like that?
We did, actually.
And give yourself additional space and future expansion area space for the fact that this is a very growing area. And wouldn't that be an option that, one, would be cost-effective and utilize what we currently have best? And not locate where you currently got it, where we've got to get rid of something that the sheriff is using, but then connect it to the current structure so that you could build that thing first, then move their temporary operations all into that, and then as you got the rest of it, then you've opened it all up. So what did you consider with that?
We did look at that, and we looked at a number of options of ways to do additions onto this building, and we looked at, can you flip back to that plan, Brad? Yeah, we actually looked at ways to increase the size of this courtroom by either doing additions down here at this end or blowing out walls. We looked at filling in this space with a courtroom. The reality is, though, you still have to keep, it's still not a super clean, build this and then do this. I mean, you still have all these restrooms, you have offices, you have areas that you have to get in. We'd have to do a lot of demo in here. So there's still, it wouldn't be super clean as, yes, build something new, use it, move in there, and then you could do the whole thing. It would still have to be a pretty extensive phase type construction
What I would
and
do,
moving around.
this is thought, I would keep them in their same space right now. I would take that sheriff's space, and I would, sheriff moves out, you gut that area, you're still operating in all the space that they currently got. You gut that out, and you then also build onto it. You actually expand that space after you've gutted the sheriff's space, and then you create an entirely new area with expanded space connected to the sheriff thing. And then, after that's all completed, you move them for their temporary operations entirely into the new space that includes the new sheriff's space that you've gutted and redone along with some addition there. And then you flip and you redo the old space completely. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you've got them in a current facility that they're operating out of, no matter how squished it is and how much of a problem, okay, it's there. So, what's wrong with doing that?
One thing we've looked at, sir, on that is if we do an addition to that building and do the complete renovation, it's gonna jump to the highest priced option. If we move county court out of that building into a new facility, we can look at repurposing this building with a very minimal amount of renovation needed.
But repurpose it for what?
There's several other county entities that are bursting at the seams for space, so we could look into moving.
And/or their spaces aren't as efficient. I'll give you an example. I know since the building was built over at the Justice Drive, it doesn't quite function great for the Board of Elections. If you've ever, stood in line or seen the lines in terms of, voting, as well as drop off, they've always, they've made it work. But we've had conversations, does that mean maybe we could repurpose it for the Board of Elections? Bigger parking lot, bigger space for them. I know that Dave Fornshell has mentioned to me many times that at some point, if you've ever been in pretrial community corrections, probation, they're pretty crammed in there. Would like additional space, maybe if the Board of Elections potentially could repurpose this to them, then, pretrial could move down, or there's as Trevor mentioned, there's many options that could be considered versus just tearing down the front part of this building.
And for instance, if Board of Elections moved in there, it would be a fraction of the cost renovating the building for them as opposed to keeping county court there.
I will say this too, I just did some quick math. There again, that existing building is about 12,500 square feet. If we were to bring that up to the other options, 17,000 square feet, that would be like a 5,000 square foot addition. Well, 5,000 square feet at $300 a square foot is $1.5 million. So basically, you could take this renovation cost and roughly add $1.5 million. All of a sudden, you've got a building that's still maybe not functionally quite as great as building a new facility at probably equal or higher cost.
How much space does the Board of Elections currently have?
They're currently in around 11,000 square feet.
So if we move them to a completely gutted and renovated area, they'd only go up about 1,000 square feet. But, so you're saying that we could make that space function better than what they've got now?
At that point, we would use some of the old jail that's connected to the back of county court. We could keep some of that existing space for Board of
Yeah, I like
Elections.
voting in jail. That sounds good.
No, in terms of storage, if you've ever been to their storage, it's a massive amount of storage, and I don't even know how much storage, what the square foot of their actual storage is, but it's a substantial amount of storage.
Correct. And as Tiff mentioned before, parking is one of our biggest issues with Board of Elections. the county court parking lot connects to the administration building parking lot. So during early voting periods, we could use the administration lot for overflow parking, and voters could simply walk across the sidewalk to the building.
Well, other than last year, have you guys ever seen a messy situation like we had with voting early at the Board of Elections?
I would say the last several presidential years, they've had lines that literally wrap around to the front of Common
No, I
Police
was
Court.
there.
Yeah.
I was
So
there.
at least the last two or, well, how long have they been over there? When was that building open? 12?
It's been there 7 years now, yeah.
And you think that that would be solved in a new structure? How could you possibly have a line as long as I've seen it, which wraps all the way from the current entranceway into where they vote? So they're going down that corridor where the Board of Elections is. They're inside, they're all the way down that corridor. They go outside the building, they do a kind of a Disneyland wraparound, which is they had in the parking lot, and then they go up the steps to the sidewalk in front of the current Common Pleas building, and they go all the way down to the entrance to the current, that's how far that thing was, at least last presidential election.
It was,
that I
it was
saw.
substantial. When it was in this building, we literally had stanchions in the lobby,
Yeah, so
you know, snaking back and forth and
so
going outside.
how is that solved?
Well, I just think I think it removes it from, and I'm not saying that's the perfect
Well, it
option.
doesn't solve it at all. It's gonna be the same thing, except they're all gonna be wrapping around a parking lot out there. In fact, if anything, it's worse. Okay. well,
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah,
It,
okay.
it was just, you know,
That's
throwing
all right.
alternative ideas to scrapping an entire building, because I'm very conscious of, you know, scrapping an asset that I think could be utilized by a different entity for,
Well, I
to
agree with that.
solve a different problem.
Tiffany, I entirely agree with that, but I don't see that we solve.
And it
the
may
Board of
not.
I don't see that we solve the Board of Elections issues by flipping them over there. I think we just recapitulate the same issue.
it may not. We haven't really, you know. So is there an idea that's been presented that you are, would like to give direction on? Would you like to think about the options?
Well, of course, yeah, I mean, this is a big decision, and you're just here with us right now. But before I make any comments, judges, since you guys came over, thank you for coming over, what do you think?
You got the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all again. First off, our presence here, and I'll let Judge Fisher speak for himself, but our presence here is to show our enthusiasm, not only from us as judges, but for our whole staff for this county court renovation project or new construction project. It's absolutely wonderful. I think Tiff might have mentioned, or Tina before, county court, you're next, and so here we are. So we know that whatever option the board selects, we will wholeheartedly support. It is a difficult decision. I agree with that. But if you want my 2 cents worth, and Judge Fisher and I talked about this, in fact, I think the design architects kind of supported this decision as our number one, and that would be option E. So among those 5 options presented to you today, that's kind of our preference. But again, take that with a grain of salt, because we haven't looked at all of the things that you have to look at as commissioners.
Okay, so option E is a standalone structure, separate from everything else, and you like that because you're separate?
That's part of it. A big part of it here is the future expansion, okay? Also, up here, this option, it closes off the domestic relations
Correct.
expansion.
I don't like taking that in cap, because that's essentially DR corridor, common pleas, that's what we had envisioned for the expansion.
And really, options B, C, D, and E, those 4, any of those would be better than option A, because option A is rehabbing that old facility at the same expense, if not more. You've just heard that. And so the remaining 4 options, I think, would be better, because we have been existing. We inherited this, and we've done as best we can, as the board is well aware. We inherited this facility that was not designed or built as a court facility. Okay, so we've made do. And now if you have the option of starting from scratch, we're not confined by those walls of the existing structure or adding on to the existing structure. which I think is,
Yeah,
personally, I
like
think
that.
that's better.
I like that too. I mean, I'm mildly like, I don't like attached, I don't like option C at all. I don't really like option D. I don't like option B. So, okay, that's option A and option E. But I do like option E the best. However, is there a reason why we wouldn't make that a potentially two-story building and leave the second story part of it not finished yet for future expansion?
You could certainly do that. I mean,
In other words, you
there's
just-
no reason you could not do
Instead
that.
of you having, it seems to me that building something that's two stories is a lot less expensive than building on something that has the same footprint that's one story. And you just leave that unfinished for future expansion for something. I don't know. Do you ever do that?
It is done. There are costs associated with building two-story buildings, of course. Everything has to be ADA accessible, so you get into elevators, you get into, at least two stairwells in each one, which are taking square footage. You have to heat and cool those spaces. So it's not, it's certainly not free space. It can be done, but there are, if you have the space and you can do it on a single floor, we always feel that that's better, accessibility-wise and that type of thing. But there again, depending on what kind of functions you have in mind for the second floor.
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying you would build it with the option of having a second floor up there where you don't use it immediately and you don't have to heat it up the same way or cool it the same way, but you have it available for future expansion for anything you might need. Because clearly, in the future, we're gonna need the space. But you make it function like you're doing here on one story at the get-go. But like David said, which I thought was a very good question, which is, you're just building space based upon our need today, but you're not anticipating the future with the current thing, except here you got a little bit room for expansion, but not a lot. And I'm thinking you might need a lot of expansion at some point, which is why I'm asking whether or not you could anticipate that by building a two-story structure, but you don't use the second story at first. You just have it be a unfinished inside structure that's, you can then create the space in the future.
Absolutely, you could do that. There again, I think the cost-wise, if finished space is going for $300 a square foot, unfinished space is probably 200 plus, somewhere in that range. So, really what you're saving with unfinished space is the finishes that go into the space, but of course you're building the structure, the elevators, the stairs, all those kind of things that serve that space, serving HVAC systems, sizing those for that future use. So there again, yes, you can absolutely do that.
And
There's no
that's something that
problem.
we could, once you've selected your design builder, we could have that discussion about
absolutely.
what that actually looks like, or the potential,
Yeah.
alternate costs.
And it's cheaper to do all the site work. If you think about doing an expansion, you do all that site work to level the area, that if there's potential addition, 10 years from now, you have all those things that would help save the long-term cost. But one thing I'm not an expert on, Judge Fisher, I know Commissioner Grossman was involved with the consolidation of county court at one point, since we have, a Franklin court and a Mason court, that the legislature was looking around at consolidation of why do we have multiple courts? What's the status of that, and would that be a game changer potentially on the space need, or is that, no, you have to have it in the community, you have to have one in Franklin, you have to have one in Mason, people aren't coming to Lebanon?
I don't believe there has been any traction with regard to that. In talking to the judges from the other courts, there is no expectation at this point in time that there is going to be a consolidation. We're not really in charge of whether there will be or won't be, but I can tell you from the other courts, there is no expectation at this time.
And the major issue, really, David, is that the Supreme Court does not like part-time judges. They want full-time judges. And so I think the first maneuver is going to be to create full-time county court judges. And, that's, with you guys, of course, being the judges, but you'd have to be full-time. And that's what they did with Judge Batchy. Judge Batchy was a part-time judge, and ultimately the Supreme Court said, nope, you gotta be full-time. And he then became full-time. So I think the first step is gonna be to handle the additional workload, to handle the increased population, is to make these two judges full-time judges. I mean, that's typically what happens. And then there'd be a consolidation, maybe countywide, to have a municipal court system that applies to both cities and townships with countywide elected or district elected judges that are full-time.
But, so the answer to the question is, yeah, that is a possibility. That's what certain people have wanted for a long time, but there is no active talk of that it's not just even imminent, it's not even on the radar right now.
Yeah,
Correct.
I'm not familiar with it.
Correct.
But I will say that the Supreme Court has repeatedly expressed the opinion that they don't like part-time judges. And when they see a population get to the point like they did in Mason, where they can force them into a full-time judgeship, they'll do it.
Commissioner Grossman is correct, that the Supreme Court has numerous occasions from numerous chief justices made that statement, which we will deal with however we need to deal with, just like this
Yeah, and
county
it'll be
will deal with.
population-based. Once you guys
Sure.
get your jurisdiction to a population, they'll force you into a full-time judgeship.
One of the
And
issues,
by the way, if they do that, then they're gonna wanna have 2 complete courtrooms. Is that being accommodated here?
that was going to be my next point. You are thinking along the same lines, and I believe with this one, we're looking at being able to expand. There, as you see on the left-hand side, there's a future courtroom if necessary. But to your point, Commissioner Young, earlier, why not build now for the anticipation of using the space? And I believe you're both looking at the same issue, whether we have a second floor or if we have not just this 16,000 square feet, but actually build the future offices, future courtroom, et cetera, just have that done, so we have the ability. So we appreciate that both of you, or all, I'm sure, all of you, yes.
I'm here.
I know, thank you very much. But we appreciate all of you looking at the need to make sure we have enough space to grow should we need that. And as this county is growing by leaps, not just walking, we're anticipating that there will be growth in our need for space. So we greatly appreciate you looking at that.
Yeah, I see a real live option, a possibility of having a requirement that both of you become full-time judges, and you have complete staff as full-time judges. You have 2 separate courtrooms as full-time judges, and if you had 2 stories, you could have 1 court and all their facilities up on the 2nd floor and 1 on the 1st floor. And, because I think that is something that does not have to go through the legislative process, and the judges can, the Supreme Court can require it, I think, once the population gets that. I'm not exactly sure how they did this in Mason, but they required Batchy to be a full-time judge, and there was no legislative option there. The Supreme Court required it. So I think we have to be cognizant of that real possibility. Regardless, it does require, David, a legislative change to X out the Mason judge and the Franklin judge and the Lebanon judge and to combine it all, you know.
Sure, but that's why I wanted to raise the point, is because that was a discussion, 8, 10 years ago. And if that's anywhere on the radar, that changes, because honestly, I'm sitting here kicking myself that when I hear that, how in the world, Tiffany, did we build the Board of Elections that, from a functionality standpoint, doesn't seem to be working, and we just did it. And that kind of like, man, that's a fail if we didn't do it
I
right.
think the board was very focused on budget at that point in time, and we built what we thought that we could afford. This is an opportunity to not do that again, to not repeat our
Well, can we use
our
some of our
budget
money from the
problem?
federal government for this?
I do not believe so. But let me just say this, this has been a project that's been on our radar for a substantial period of time. We've been saving money for the project. Jim Spaeth, through the excess title funds, has provided money over the years. He has indicated to me that will continue. We do have excess funds from what we saved with the jail that we absolutely can use, because that was our savings that we're not going to use on the jail. So I'm not quite concerned about the financial piece of this particular project. I'd like to get it right. We can have it as an alternate for them to look at, to your points about going ahead and building the space either up or down as an alternate once we pick a design builder. We can absolutely do that, get you the pricing, and then you
I
can
would
make those
like-
decisions.
I would like that, and I think that we must, I much prefer option E. And so from my standpoint, I don't know how my colleagues feel about it. I much like option E, but I want option E to look at the potential of having 2 complete courtrooms. Not now, because we don't need it now, but, because you've got part-time judges that are using the courtroom on separate days. And they're basically, you combine the 2, they got a full-time judge. But I see at some point, there's gonna be 2 full-time judges that need to be in that facility with their staffs, with their own courtrooms, with their own facilities, and that's just gonna happen. So we might as well plan for that, and then we can work on the Board of Elections problem, which I don't think that we're solving the Board of Elections problem by flipping to a place that almost has the same exact space, but, we can deal with them separately.
And just a point about funding too, the county court does have a special projects fund that's been accumulated for many, many years. It's something that we.
Yeah, we had you guys
That's
putting a
correct.
little money away way back when, if I remember
And
correctly.
we may have upwards, probably 750,000 or a little
That's
bit
what I was
more.
gonna say, 750, 800
Yeah.
is what they have to
Yeah,
contribute
so,
to this
so we can
project.
ante that up as well.
Yes.
So, and do they, it's still a requirement, it's a requirement on you guys that you have to retire at 70?
It is.
Not retire at 70,
You
but
can't-
we
you
cannot
can't-
run.
you can't
at
run.
70
You
times.
can't be
You
reelected.
can't run.
After we
Correct.
turn
You
70.
could act as a retired judge functioning, et cetera, but you cannot be reelected. Somebody else would have to take your position.
That is correct.
If you're elected at 69, you can be 75 and still
Yeah, I get that.
6-year term.
Have you guys planned on that?
I'm happy to be here today.
Okay. All right, I agree with you. I like option E best.
Shannon, comments?
So I have some questions, please. Travis, I'm wondering if you could tell me, we're hearing about the square footage is accommodating the needs for today. What is the period of time by which you would anticipate additional square footage needs? I mean, that's a pretty substantial jump. I would say that while that may be needed for today, that you anticipate that lasting a while, no?
That's a good question. I think a 17,000 square foot new construction would probably be comfortable for 5 to 10 year period for county court. The judges could probably speak to that better than I can, but it's 17,000's a good footprint.
Coming from 6, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think you're baking in a lot of efficiencies into the space and how it operates that potentially
yeah, I
could
mean, you're building
assist that.
a custom, a custom location to
Correct.
meet the very specific needs, which has efficiencies, but also longevity built into it by
Correct.
design.
Correct.
And so while I totally appreciate the conversation around possible expansion and wanting to plan for that, it seems to me that that is modified by, the longer that threshold is, why do I want to invest capital in something that we're not going to be utilizing for 10 years or 12 years or whatever that period of time may be, especially since we have the luxury of land and we don't often have to look for land acquisition.
Correct. I think it would be a good idea to kind of meet in the middle between the two we've talked about, the 17,000 compared to a full second story on the building. I think somewhere in the middle is kind of the ideal spot for that. I think we could add maybe 3,000 to 4,000 square feet onto this new construction, and then you're looking at a 20 to 30 year facility at that point.
Which would all be an additional judge or 2 full-time judges,
Yeah, I just
et
want-
cetera. That's where your expansion
I
and
want you to
the.
plan for
yeah.
2 full-time judges, because I think that's not happening in the next 10 or 15 years. I think it's happening sooner than that.
And we can do that.
I think if we hit that 20,000 square foot mark, we can accomplish that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting at, is where is that sweet spot, you know, where it's worth that longer-term investment?
Correct. Because there's a lot of common usage in the building as far as security, clerks, probation. The court can grow into that extra 3,000 square feet and meet their needs for the next 20 to 30 years.
Do you know what their population for their jurisdictions are? Do you guys know what your population is
I'd only be guessing, 110, 115?
for both of you?
Total. Yeah, we have the same population.
Right, I get you,
Yes.
110, 115. I think you're right on the cusp then of being full-time.
Can you,
I may be speaking out of turn, but I think the number's 150. I'll have to take a look at the statute, Bruce, maybe you have that handy.
Yeah. But take a look at that, somebody. Because
Travis,
that-
can you,
Trevor.
Trevor, I'm sorry, Trevor, can you tell me, when you would anticipate for the common pleas court, that expansion that we're preserving, that space for common pleas, where is that in your thought process?
According to the domestic relations court, it could happen within the next 5 years, possibly.
And that footprint is, do you know about how many square feet possible?
If we build on for domestic relations, I think we could get by with probably an 8 to 12,000 square foot addition to that building where we wouldn't be eating up as much space as a county court addition would. We could probably do it for almost half of what county court would take.
Okay.
Because it would be a similar situation at domestic relations where they'll add another full-time judge. So we would have to add a main courtroom and then the judges' chambers and staff areas.
But the entrance and the security and those sorts of things
Would remain the same.
consistent.
Yeah.
That's helpful, thank you.
Very good. So I think, yeah, when we try to pull it back, go from 1,000 feet up to 30,000 feet, you know, what is the holistic view of what we're trying to accomplish? I had discussions with Judge Flannery years ago and Judge Kirby about who's next, what's happening, hang in there. Judge Flannery, he made the statement, Tiff, way back when. Remember, I've been promised this for decades. Thought it was never going to happen. Well, we did what we said we were going to do. We actually did do it. We told Juvenile that we were going to expand their space. We did that. And we said to you fellows, the court, that once the sheriff's office moves, then you're next. And so we intend on living up to that, and we identify and we know that you guys have been cramped, that it's not, you know, when you have essentially the cattle call herd, you know, come in, this is not efficient. There's even safety concerns when you put that many people that are there to see the court in that small of a space. So we get that, we realize that, we know we have to do something. Now we're trying to define what something is. I think I concur that option E seems to be the best option right now. It makes a lot of sense that you have it segregated, you have the entire courts on one end. I like the fact that the expansion because when we designed the common pleas, we wanted those two end caps, that eventually that they can do that. And that you can do the expansion of common pleas there. And if we put you at the end of the common pleas, that really kind of hamstrings them. So a separate facility seems to make a lot of sense. Then it gets into trying to solve other problems, and now we do have an open building that we can renovate that's not going to be torn down. It's going to be renovated and used for another purpose, which is, you know, respecting the taxpayers' investment in the existing building. The old jail is kind of a different story, that there's really not a repurposing of that, short of one Hail Mary idea that's out there. But I think we should go down this path. I think that's something for the architects and staff to consider. We're very cognizant of a second courtroom. Do we do that now? Do we do a second floor? Do we build some shelf space and make it a little bit larger to where if that second courtroom is needed, then you can just shuffle some things around internally or move some offices here or there. So trying to plan for it, because it's never gonna be cheaper than to build it now. We know it's coming. Then, you know, I think we should seriously entertain that concept of having at least an open space that we could put a separate courtroom in. And again, that's up to the judges. I don't know, does it have to be the same size? You know, do you, I don't know those types of questions. I know one has to be substantial, because you have so many people coming in and out of that's just the type of court you're running. So I think that's the path we should start going down. It sounds like I've got same, I'm
Yeah,
listening to my colleagues.
The one thing I would just add to that, which is kind of a separate issue, but I think you really alluded to it, Dave, which is kind of, we have now several times opted to do a brand-new build because it's much more cost-effective for the taxpayers, it's more efficient to be operated that way, and we're leaving these buildings, these legacy assets, and I feel like we're reaching this critical mass where we ought to have a conversation around a long-term plan for our campus here. Because there's a lot of square footage that, you know, we don't have purposes for it, or we have an idea about it as we're thinking about the growth of the county and moving Board of Elections and other things, but I really think that that is a conversation we ought to have about all that, you know, kind of a master plan for our campus.
Which is a good thought, and I think that's probably something we should think about, and that also entails for all these different county agencies that are all over the place, whether they're Silver Street or what have you, what's that cost per square foot of operating that facility? Because it's an old building and it's this and the HVAC and the electric costs and all that. What if that was in a newer building on this campus? And then so those are all the, you know, good longer term type of things that we should be thinking about, because I agree that, you know, we only get this opportunity once with this campus, with this open space. How do we do it? How do we maximize it? And again, if there's ever a time to do it with this ridiculous borrowed money that we've been thrown from Washington, even though we can't directly use it for this, it gives us flexibility on what we do with our other budget, because
Yes.
we have a lot of wiggle room now on these dollars that have come in. So
Yep.
I think the board has given you direction.
Option E, with the criteria as an alternate to expand that building, or even, you know,
Right, look at that.
as an
That-
alternate
Right,
to
that-
expand the courtroom.
Right, at a minimum, have the site prepared for
Yes.
expansion.
Okay. Which is
Number
what we
one,
did with
that's a
juvenile.
minimum.
Which is
Number
what we did with
two,
juvenile.
Alternatives for a second story,
Okay.
what would that look like? And with 2B being, go ahead and build an extra few thousand square feet now to accommodate a courthouse
Very
or a
good.
courtroom.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very good. Mr. Broush, I'm sure you were entertained and informed sitting there, but we're going to have to reschedule you. We've got council waiting on us right now. And,
We're gonna just flip Chris with
yeah, we'll call you
Dave.
back, we'll call you back over when we're done, if you're available in half an hour, 45 minutes, something. Is there a motion to go into executive session on pending litigation?
Pending litigation.
Yes, so moved.
And we anticipate action, I believe.
See, Colonel?